Yeah, what is it? I was talking to him because we talked to him yesterday. I played him once. I won. That was when he was 13. It's one of those things I'm like, all right, I still got you right now. I don't know, give it a couple years and I'm concerned.
I played a Grixis mirror against him, and like he navigated the game better, but sideboarded worse. So like I beat him, but like if his cards were better, he just would have beat me.
Yeah, but he's still, and that's the scary part, because like he's still on the way
it's
up,
just like,
right?
oh, next time I play against him, he's gonna get me.
Yeah. Jackson looked like taking a mulligan this game. This is one of the closer matchups here. Infect and Dredge have been the two most popular decks here at the Open. Jim Davis on the play. Jackson contemplating his 6, but he's going to keep.
And this is a matchup where Blighted Agent and Distortion Strike are among the most important cards. Jackson, like most Infect players this weekend, does have 2 copies of Distortion Strike.
Turn 1, Jim just has a Wooded Foothills, so he'll go ahead and get a land. For Jackson, his keep of 6 starts with a turn 1 Glistener Elf, but Jim at the ready, Dark Blasting it away.
That's really brutal.
When we saw this matchup yesterday, if you want to watch it, it was a great match on camera of Aaron Campbell versus Emma Handy. Dark Blast in Aaron Campbell's deck looked great. She was able to create a ton of pressure with the card without actually casting it. I feel like there's 2 ways to play Infect. What Emma, when she was playing Infect, did is she played around Dark Blast the whole game. I think that's one way to play. The other one is to just throw everything into it and make them have it. Jackson went for the second one here and got punished.
Yeah, and you can't just not cast Glistener Elf on turn 1. In Dredge, it just gets, against the Dredge deck, it just gets so much worse after your first opportunity to attack on turn 2, play or draw. And it's just, you can't sit and wait because then there's just going to be prized amalgams to block it.
So here's what happened here. Jim cast the Dark Blast, then he untapped for his draw phase. He dredged the Dark Blast back into his hand, milling into a Bloodghast. Then before playing a land, he's casting Faithless Looting. We're on his second turn. So for the first draw of Faithless Looting, he's going to dredge a Grave Troll. He's now looking at the second draw was another Grave Troll. So he dredged, milled 12, discarded Prized Amalgam and Golgari Grave Troll.
Up to 2 amalgams in the graveyard now.
Right. And keep in mind, he has not made his land drop, so he's going to do that now, makes his land drop. Bloodghast comes out of the graveyard, and we have 2 delayed triggers from Prized Amalgams. That's why you saw Jim discard this Prized Amalgam to Faithless Looting.
And for Hicks, his first creature died. For Jim, this is actually very good dredging.
Right. Now 8 power in play for Jim as he passes back. He left up Copperline Gorge as his land for the turn, so the Dark Blast that is in his hand is down, at least for now. Jackson will play Inkmoth Nexus as his second land, and it looks like he's just passing the turn.
With Inkmoth Nexus, that'll disincentivize Jim to do something like flashback Faithless Looting on this turn, which is, good for Jackson. The issue here is that Jim already has a lot of stuff going on. Jackson's at 18, he has 8 power on the table, and it's all recurring threats.
Jim will dredge for the turn of a Grave Troll. Mills 6 more. Narcomoeba is among the mills. You have to assume it's a 2-turn clock for Jim, right? 8 power here. And also there's a Conflagrate in his graveyard.
And the Narcomoeba provides a blocker for the Inkmoth Nexus.
I hear Dredge players talk as though this is a hard matchup for them. When I watch games like this, I'm not sure I understand.
There's games that have extremely different textures. If you go back and watch Aaron and Emma's matchup, the game 2, I believe, with the Nissa Voices Zendikar was a very interesting and complex game. In the games where the Infect player is allowed to either just run away on the play with a Glistener Elf or prolong the game a little bit more than this, say Jim doesn't hit these prized amalgams. This game looks super different.
All right, so Jim swings for 8. He puts Jackson down to 10. He then actually taps out to flashback Faithless Looting.
Okay, given that he has the blocker and that Jackson has to use his breeding pool to activate the Inkmoth Nexus, he's not really afraid of dying.
I understand he's unlikely to die here. I'm still a little surprised just because I thought he had this locked up so hard that I wanted to just leave up. Maybe I'm just being too much of a control player. I wanted to leave up Dark Blast all game.
It takes land, Distortion Strike, multiple mutagenic growths. I don't think that. I think his odds of dying are infinitesimal.
All right, so Jim mills 12 more. Actually, some big misses there. He milled another Amalgam, but that Amalgam didn't see the Narcomoeba come into play earlier this turn, so it's not going to come back.
Shucks. Yeah, and as you were saying, Jim already has more than enough stuff on the table, especially with that Conflagrate in the graveyard.
So he'll pass. You see most of his deck now in the graveyard. This may be Jackson's last turn. He does have a Distortion Strike. And there's a chance. Might of Old Krosa, Become Immense, Distortion Strike, Spell Pierce look to be Jackson's cards.
And he's stuck on these 2 lands. That's going to make it impossible to punch through here.
Yeah, the one thing he was thinking last turn is whether or not to Spell Pierce that Faithless Looting. It looks like he hung on to it. I don't know if it matters either way.
Yeah. He can still technically Spell Pierce the Conflagrate, not die on the following turn.
Okay, and get himself one more turn. I guess if you want to do Spell Pierce the Conflagrate, and then if he had land this turn, land next turn, and of course, and if none of them are fetch lands, then maybe he has enough mana to all in one turn.
And Jim's got enough stuff going on where that back end of the Faithless Looting didn't really matter. It was mostly just cast your Spell Pierce or don't.
It would be something like if Jackson had this turn was land, Noble, Hierarch, go, and then Spell Pierce Jim's play, untap, he would have enough mana to Distortion Strike, Become Immense, Might of Old Krosa. There's a lot of things that would have to go his way.
Basically, any way that he wins the game here involves at least 1 mutagenic growth, which after the following attack from Jim is something that he won't be able to cast.
Right, it's not a card in his hand anymore. And all of this, of course, if Jim just plays 4th untapped land, then all of this doesn't matter because the Conflagrate actually resolves.
Sure.
Distortion Strike on Inkmoth Nexus swings for 2 poison, says go.
So given that Jackson is choked on lands, the idea here is on the following turn, the spell will rebound. So he'll be able to animate Inkmoth Nexus, be able to target that with Distortion Strike, and then if he draws a land, he can cast another spell on top of that, given that he missed his land drop. However, Jim is not going to miss up on the opportunity to just kill Jackson.
So what happens there, he passes the turn. He's playing on this out where if Jim forgets the Conflagrate's a card, he gets another turn. Jim just points to it, or maybe says, I'm going to play it. Game and match. Jim Davis with Dredge off to a 3-0 start today.
And these are really the 2 decks of the tournament, Dredge and Infect. We'll see exactly how many of these individual archetypes crack the top 8.